21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
I've done $100 million worth of events. I do over 300 epic events a year that no one will ever forget. They're unbelievable events. Got lots of 5-star reviews, creating memories, creating connections, changing the course of history. But it wasn't always that way. I was the guy flying private jets. I was the guy with the $100,000 car in the driveway. And I was looking for loose change in the couch cushions, trying to figure out how to put gas in the car and how to pay for my kids' school lunches. So that's how we got to where we are today. My name is Roger Igo. I'm the CEO of the leading location hosting weddings and special events in the #1 market on the planet, which is in Houston, Texas. We do over 300 events a year. Anywhere from maybe it is a $50,000 event or 6-figure or 7-figure events. The key is epic events that create memories that go down in history. And so that's what I do, that's what we do, that's what my team does. I've got over 80 employees right now. That's just kind of an overview of what we do in our business. This is actually my 34th job, which is kind of appropriate because our business is on 34th Street. And so I did start the journey as an entrepreneur growing up, starting way back when I had a snow cone business, or I was selling candy on the school buses, or when I was mowing the yards, I was the go-to kid in the neighborhood if you wanted to catch the lizard or pull weeds. Everybody knew you could always call me. I was the entrepreneur kid who would do anything for a buck, pretty much. And that was me growing up until eventually I decided I was going to music college, and that, you know, in music college, I actually did a lot of odd jobs, climbing in hot attics, fixing air conditioning systems with duct tape in attics for friends and family, and painting addresses on the curbs in front of the house, trying to save up money because I wanted to go to music college. It's Berklee College of Music time. A buddy of mine was going. And so after I was in college realizing, wait a minute, I'm going out, I'm hustling, trying to get gigs, trying to get places to play. And I found myself playing in the house band at Harper's Ferry, which is across the street from MIT, the oldest pub in America, in Cambridge. And I realized then and there that I was doing already what I was going to school to learn how to do. So I started putting together, I said, I don't want to do this college thing, really. I started putting together a band. I was doing the business side of music. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but I was more drawn from playing saxophone more towards the business side of the music business. I put together a band. I started booking gigs and booking jobs. And so that was really some of the early days in my career, which really even ties back to the high school talent show that I was in, where we were coming up with creative ways to keep the audience engaged. And so that's kind of the creative side merging with the business side early in my career. I did college, then I was doing bands, and when I decided I was at the top of the mountain, I wasn't the right person anymore when I got there. I got to the top of the mountain, and what I thought was my dream job, everything I ever set out to do in life had starting to come to pass. But when I got to the top of the mountain and our band, we were playing in festivals and in just very large venues with big audiences, got to open up for many of our dream bands that we followed. We were fans of these bands that we got to open up for, and we got to just play in front of huge audiences. One of them was 500,000 people. But I wasn't the right person anymore when I got to the top of the mountain. And so just through some life changes and transitions, and I'm not going to go through all of my 34 jobs, but I hung sheetrock. I worked as a lot finder for a builder. I was a bill collector, um, sold long distance telephone back in the day. That was trying to get people to switch their long distance telephone provider. It was just a long and windy road. So, but I did start working as a bill collector. And I started reading these. It was funny because it was a challenge to me as a bill collector, because I thought this is kind of a weird job. People, oh, you're a bill collector, bad job. You got to get out of it. But it was a challenge to me. And so I started reading books. And I realized everything my dad would say, everything you ever wanted to know is in books. All you got to do is read books. So I picked up this book called The Psychology of Influence by Robert Cialdini. And it was the art of persuasion, basically. And so I read this book and I wrote through in all the margins everywhere, underlined and highlighted. And basically I had bill collecting on my mind, top of mind, as I was reading this book for psychology. And I started to apply this psychology as a bill collector. So I would call, and I was hourly, but they would give you bonuses. Pretty soon I noticed they had this leaderboard, and it's like sales. It's basically like sales. You're trying to sell the people who wrote a bad check to make good on their check that they wrote. And I was working for Telecheck at the time. So I noticed I had shot to the top of the board, and I was like, by a lot, I was collecting way more money than my coworkers. People would fight to sit next to me, like, what is this guy doing? So I started realizing my coworkers would try to copy what I was doing. They would listen and then try to copy what I was doing. So what wound up happening was I went to my boss. I said, I don't want to be on hourly plus bonus. I just want straight commission. They agreed. I said, not only that, but I want to set my own hours. They're like, you want to set your own hours? Yeah, I want to come and go whenever I want. And so I became this boss of a bill collector. I wasn't a boss. I didn't have any direct reports, but I was the king of bill collecting. And that's when I realized you can only fit $13,000 in each pants pocket. I had wads of cash that I was just collecting in bonus money. So I went from, because no one would hire a former saxophone player, band leader. Like, do you got any skills? How fast can you type? Have you ever done anything? Nobody wants to hire a saxophone player. So that's how I got into bill collecting, and that's how I learned about the power of books, and I learned about how much you can absorb and learn from books, and I gained an appetite for really learning and books. And somewhere in there, I took a business law class at the community college, which is also a game changer for me. And um, so I eventually, the powers that be at the bill collecting company started realizing, man, they started, they kind of started changing the compensation plans a little bit. Like, I'm not, I think I need to find something else. So I had been during the day, because bill collecting wasn't good during the day, going over to a family friend's house who was in the building custom homes. He said, listen, I need a lot finder. So I figured out through the city offices, they were doing this project which caused old ladies to want to sell their house because the city was moving the sewer lines from the back alley to the front streets or whatever. So I would put out postcards, and I started finding a lot of lots. So this builder friend of the family, he had too many projects. He said, listen, I've got too many jobs. And he handed me a set of blueprints. And so I did work for him as a lot finder, but I said, just whatever you were going to give me as to finding lots, just bank it, just put it, keep it as a credit for me or whatever. This sounds interesting. So I took these set of plans, and I started asking each trade, like, what do you got to do next? He'd say, well, the next thing, I just asked the workers, what do I do next? And so they basically would train me. And not only did they train me on building houses from the survey and the foundation and the framing and the roofing and all of the stuff that goes into a house, but I also learned Spanish. And I learned how to build a house. But while I'm building these houses, I would notice periodically, like, I'm in the heat. There's the construction site and the workers and the sweat and the driving all across town and always going to Home Depot and on the phone all the time. I just noticed periodically I'd spend 6 months or 9 months building these spec houses or dealing with the lady, the homeowner. Went from building 2 houses a year to 20 houses a year, I think. Or I think the busiest year we had like 15 going at once or something like that. But there would be these huge BMWs and huge Mercedes. They would drive up, and I would notice, like, that lady, she's well dressed. She smells like, smells nice. She's just been around for about 2 weeks, and I'm sure she just sold that house and picked up a cool 30,000 or 40,000 bucks just being around for a couple of weeks. I thought, easy money. I'm getting my real estate license. So I got my real estate license, and it's actually a lot harder than it seems because you got to have a network when you're doing real estate deals and stuff. And so I did get my real estate license, and then I started I would get buying houses online. I had a small line of credit that I got it was like just a signature loan. So I started buying houses with a little bit of down payment, but since I had a real estate license, I figured out I could get 107% loan for a house back in the day. So with my 3% on the buyer's side as a realtor, I could put that together with the 107% loan. I've got 3% plus the extra 7%. Well, that's 10% down. So then I learned I could use credit cards and lines of credit to fix up the house, or 0% interest for a window package when I started fixing up houses and flipping them and making money that way as a real estate agent. And so I started at one time, I think I bought 6 houses at once. So I started doing real estate. In there somewhere, I realized I don't need to have a broker because you have to sometimes pay the broker extra as a realtor. So I got upgraded to a broker's license. I mean, it's just one thing after another. pretty soon, a friend of the family, he was in the wedding business, and his lease was coming to an end, and he and his landlord didn't like each other, and he was a big thinker, and he didn't want to renew his lease, or wasn't sure if the landlord was going to renew his lease. So he came up with this idea to find property and build a monster wedding venue. And so it was a friend of the family. He knew I was doing some building and construction and had some real estate background. So he basically recruited me to help him. I gave him bids and proposals and kind of, you know, later on, there was a hurricane and it put him out of business. He had taken in money. He couldn't deliver these weddings. He disappeared. He went into hiding. My kids called him Evil Dan. It forced everything into basically, since he wasn't putting on the weddings and couldn't refund the money. This was while his new facility was under construction, for which I was the builder. Basically, long story short, his creditors forced him into bankruptcy. He could no longer pay me, his contractor, and I was young at the time and stupid. I had put everything was personal guarantee. So when he couldn't pay me, I couldn't pay my workers, and I was fully extended. That forced me into bankruptcy. Um, so I'm in bankruptcy, and basically, I mean, didn't know what to do. It was some dark times. I mean, that's like the story of when I mean, it was some dark, dark times. And I thought, I contemplated, it was a bad place for me. I don't want to say, because maybe my children are listening, but it was just not a good place mentally or financially or emotionally or spiritually. Everything was just in the valley of despair. And I searched high and low for what to do. And I remember being in the parking lot in my car on the phone in desperation with a buddy of mine. And he said, Roger, you know this. You've got real estate background. You're an entrepreneur. He says, you know this. You're going to find your way out. You can do this. So I, was able to see another day, and I did, with, the prayers of my mother and the blessing from my wife to go forward with my plan, and the grace of God, and we were able to pull it off. And we had a deal. I created this deal structure. I found investors, and I can talk more on the whole deal structure. But it was, basically, I knew the landlord would be I knew an investor. I had investors lined up. There was a bankruptcy judge I thought, if I could find a buyer for this huge facility, then maybe I could get some proceeds from the sale of it and pay some of my subcontractors, and maybe keep a little money for myself as the broker of the finding investors to buy the property out of bankruptcy. And then at the 11th hour, the judge said, no, you can't represent the buyer because you're a creditor to this guy's bankruptcy. Um, and so that kind of put cold water on my deal for a minute. But at the end of the day, my buyers still were the highest bidder. In fact, they were the only bidder. And the deal was, I said, I want to represent you. I told them when I found them in the first place, I said, I'm going to make you $1 million. And which, the common sense says never promise a return. But I was desperate. I said, I'm going to make you $1 million. And I said, I want to make you $1 million. And here's how we're going to do it. We tied the rent back to their out of pocket because the project was still not complete. The project was in the middle of construction. So I knew how much was needed to finish the project. I knew how much it was going to cost. I said, we'll base everything on whatever you're out of pocket to finish the project. I want to be your tenant. I'll finish it. I'll be your broker, number one. If you get it, I would like to be your contractor to finish the project. And then I would like to be your tenant. And we'll base it on the amount that you have. I want to, as your tenant, I want you to finish it beautifully, but I don't want the rent to be too high. As your contractor, so I'm your contractor and your future tenant. So they agreed. Kind of a long story, but they did get the property. They did let me be their contractor to finish the project, and they did let me sign as their tenant. And I said on the idea that I'm going to run the business, and in 3 to 5 years, I'm going to buy it from you based on a formula like a multiplier, and I'm going to use the financials from running it as a business to go get a mortgage to buy it from you, which I did. And at 4 years and 1 month, I did buy it from them, and I didn't make them $1 million all in with the rent and the rent payments and everything. And the multiplier, I didn't make them $1 million. I made them $4 million. And so that was the point where we moved in was 2009. The point where we purchased it was 2013. And so my wife and I have owned it since we've been the owners of the land and building and the business that's in it since 2013, even though the business itself was born in 2009. So that's kind of the story. One of the contingencies was that they wanted to have a named chef. So I had been in previous years, I had been to an auction where we were one of the highest bidders to go to a fancy dinner where the host was going to be Chef Johnny Carrabba. So he is the founder of Carrabba's. And so when they said, we want you to have a named chef, I said, I know a chef. I know Johnny Carrabba. And the honest truth is I really had only met him, through that one auction dinner we went to. So he didn't know who I was. But they said, okay, well, we would like to come down before we decide whether we're going to invest in your property and do this deal with you. We want to meet this Johnny Carrabba chef. And so I'm like, okay, no problem. Even though I was like, shoot, I don't know if I should have said that, but it's like a Hail Mary. I need to get this done. And and by the way, my personal bankruptcy, I think that year was a $13 million, the largest, if not one of the largest personal bankruptcy filings that year, which was '09, because I thought if it wasn't for Bernie Madoff in the news, I was going on TV, because when Evil Dan crashed, everybody thought that was me. And so I was, there was people after me and feared for my life and everything. But I digress. So here I am. I've got to figure out how to introduce my potential investors to Johnny Caraba, who doesn't know me, as my chef. Because their contingency was that you're going to do this. If we do it, you're going to have a named chef. I don't have any money. Fast forward, I've got the $100,000 car in the driveway. I have no gas. I'm trying to figure out how to put gas in the car to go to the investor meeting. And by the way, my wife kind of knows, but doesn't really know, like, we're out of money. My mom was sending me gift cards to the grocery store. So I show up at the Caraba's restaurant where Johnny Caraba is known to hang out. The investors have flown in from Tennessee. They're expecting to go to dinner with Johnny Caraba. I get there early with my wife. I go to the maitre d' at the front desk. I said, "Is Johnny Caraba here?" And they're like, "No, he's not here, but he might be here later." Like, okay, well, I've got called in reservations for 4 of us. And I mean, I'm sweating. I don't know what I'm going to do. In fact, I don't have money to pay for dinner for my quote investors. I don't know what I'm going to do. And if you believe in The Secret, or your mind, your thoughts manifest themselves and this kind of thing, I'm a believer in that world. And I love the idea that what you think you become. And so I say to the maitre d', I said, well, if he does show up, it would mean the world to me if he could come over and say hi and pretend he knows me. And I'm Roger. And so I left it at that. So we get to our table, we have our dinner, we discuss the investment, we discuss the property, and here comes dessert. And like, would you like dessert and everything? Out of the corner of my eye, I see Johnny Caraba walking towards us. He stops at our table and he says, "Roger." He opens his arms. He's like, "Roger, hey, long time no see." And so we make the introduction, some small talk and everything. He says, "Tell you what, dinner's on me." And so that story of Johnny Caraba, I mean, I was shocked. I was totally shocked. And even though he didn't become our chef, it was enough to move the ball further down the road to get the deal done with the potential investors. And actually, the story of that Johnny Caraba interaction is in part of my book, which is called "Keep On Going," which is it's the history of the bell tower on 34th, and that was my first book, and so that story, we call it the Johnny Caraba story, is part of it. So that's really kind of part of the journey that got us to open our doors here at the bell tower on 34th, which became ultimately the training grounds for how to produce epic events no one will ever forget. And since then, I mean, we've trained so many event producers on how to do this, to make events that are memorable, that go down, the memory of the event, it survives next week, survives next month, next year, maybe it survives a decade, but we want them to survive and go down in history and survive generations and become legendary. And so that's what we do here in Houston, Texas, at the bell tower on 34th. I would say this is my third time to the top of the mountain. The first time was success in the music industry, doing the music business. The second time was in the real estate and construction and real estate development business and I was very successful doing that until bankruptcy. And then now the third time to the top of the mountain where we're well known for epic events and doing $100 million worth of events that no one will ever forget. But the common theme for each of those, I would say, is yes, grit and fortitude, and like the title of my book, keep on going. Um, but I think another overarching theme with all of it has to do with vision. And vision is a special quality, or vision is a special ingredient, I should say, for accomplishing what you set out to do. And I think, in my opinion, once you get clarity of vision, your heart begins to follow. Every molecule in your body aligns with your vision. So when I say vision, I don't mean to say you look out onto the horizon and see the horizon with the sunset vision in the physical world. I mean vision in your mind's eye. And I think people who have the skill to see without actually seeing something in the physical have the ability to align energy behind what they see in their mind's eye. So what I mean to say is your actions begin to work towards the vision that you see in your mind's eye. Your actions, your thoughts, your it's just an energy that forms, and it gathers pace, and it creates momentum that helps to pull other energies toward the vision. And so I'm not sure I've always understood that quality until I began to live it, and I began to realize there is something to formulating a clear vision and get clarity of vision. And oddly, the more the closer to I guess, what should I say, the more clarity you have of your vision, the faster the vision comes to fruition. And so the closer you get to fruition, the more clarity you get. So it's almost like a snowball effect, an exponential um, effect, if you will, that helps get a person closer to what they see in their mind's eye. It's almost like goal setting. It's maybe a different way to say set a goal and then work towards the goal, but it's actual clarity of vision. And I would say, whether I was in the music business or in the real estate business or in the events business, each and every time I wanted to get something done, I knew it would happen. I knew instantly, once I had it in my mind's eye, that this was going to happen. So when I look back on Evil Dan, and I met Evil Dan and he was doing weddings and events, I knew instantly I can do better than this guy. I could do way better than this guy, and I just knew it. And if I ever had the opportunity to do it, which it was by accident and by fate that I was put in a position to need that skill set, I knew. And as my friend was telling me as I was sitting in my car over the phone by myself, and he says, "You know this." It was really getting the vision of how I was going to get it accomplished, and then going back to some of the books that I've read. Because if you don't know a little small piece of how you're going to make that jump from A to B, you can read a book about it and you can get added knowledge and learn the pieces that you don't know, and you can get that from books. So, in fact, I used my skills from my bill collecting days, using the art of psychology to influence my quote investors. In fact, I was able to raise over $6 million, and I gave up zero equity, and I took on zero debt. And so that was one of the ingredients that my friend was telling me about when he said, you know this. And it really was what helped take me from being in my car in a state of despair to being able to get the deal done and then actually run the business to what it became today. And when we were actually up and operating and running, everybody had their advice on how to do things. But I knew, listen, we're going to do ours differently. We're going to do multiple events at a time, and we're going to go, and we're not going to do it like all the other competitors are doing it. And we did take pieces from different industries and formulate policies and procedures that became really codified into our playbook and our procedure manuals and our SOPs that we use today, standard operating procedures that are really parts and pieces from different industries across. And that's how we run our facility today. But if it hadn't have been for the vision of, from mountaintop to mountaintop, I don't think we would have been able to accomplish, or I wouldn't have been able to get us to the promised land. So that's what I think. That's my approach. If you want to find out more about my story or how I love business. I am a fan of business. I love from startups to operations to fundraising to really, I'm an operations guy at heart. But if you want to learn more about my background or what we do in our business or what our business is for, you can always go to my website, which is rogerigo.com. And that's Roger with no D, Roger, R-O-G-E-R, I-G-O.com. And there's my link trees, and there's all my different channels, and there's, everything you wanted to know about me or my different brands or our businesses or our, my books or podcasts or anything else Roger Igo related.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.